welcome to the next installment of Fixit Fingers Fibers. Today, accessories. But before we start, I just got to make one quick little check. Hey Daz.
What? Do we have to? Yeah, you're good, mate.
Cheers, mate. With that out of the way, we're going to get into the 5 things that are accessories that I think you need before you really get kicked off in this woodworking caper. At the very least, you want to pick them up pretty early, but the first one is the most important and one that you should have in your arsenal before you even turn on a power tool. That is, of course, PPE, personal protective equipment. I have a whole video on dust masks in particular in this topic. However, in a short list, we've got a few things on the table. The masks of various types and size, look, you have to have one pretty much. It doesn't matter how good your dust extraction is, there are going to be fine particles of dust in the air which are going to get into your lungs, and over time they're going to build up and they can cause you a whole bunch of hassles, particularly if you're using manufactured goods or things like Jarrah that have a really, really fine dust. You just don't want to mess with it. They're not the most comfortable thing in the world sometimes, but trust me, you're better off having one than not. The next one, the specs. These safety glasses are an essential for whenever you've got a moving tool around. So hand tools, you may not necessarily need one unless you've got some big chunks flying up in your eyes, but for all your power tool stuff, then you're going to want your safety goggles on, because if you can't see, you're not going to be able to woodwork anymore, and that wouldn't be terribly fun. A reasonable set of ear defenders or ear protection. Again, if you're a hand tool enthusiast, these aren't going to get too much use. But if you are into the power tools like me, particularly if you've got some larger, big machinery that can make some hell of a lot of decibels, then ear defenders are essential. These are cut-proof gloves. I don't use them. However, there are some woodworkers who know a hell of a lot more than I do that are a fan of wearing gloves. Generally speaking, I find that I'm not as dexterous when I'm wearing them, and so I don't like to have them on. But as I said, a couple of people do like to have them, and it's something you can look at from people who know more than me if you want to go down the gloves route. Let's kick off onto something, well, that sucks. Speaking of PPE, if you're doing anything in the workshop other than talking at a camera explaining PPE, try wearing some appropriate footwear so you don't get your toes crushed. Number 2 is dust extraction. I just have a really simple shop vac setup. I've added a small cyclone and I've put it onto a dust cart. I can wheel this around from tool to tool. I'm only ever using one tool at a time, so it does me just fine. Is it the best thing on the market? Most certainly not. If you're going to do this properly full-time with bigger machinery, then you're going to want to look into some proper dust extraction. But for the starter, for under $100, you can get one of these, and for not too much more, you can add the cyclone, which really beefs up its ability to collect dust that you have created. Having said that, not only is it keeping the dust out of the air, but once you've done making a mess, you can use this too. So a shop vac is definitely going to be your best friend in order to get jobs done in a satisfying way, clean up the mess that you've made. Number 3, clamps. I've got a whole clamp rack, and it's quite small, but it suits me for my purposes. They're the sorts of things that you can never have enough of, but you will build up over time. There is no need to go and buy 50 clamps all out at once. They do get kind of expensive. In terms of what's available, well, that's just heaps. We've got C clamps, F clamps, not pictured, face clamps, bar clamps, pipe clamps, spring clamps, band clamps. There are so many clamps for different applications that you could spend your lifetime collecting them, and some people do. However, you can start off with some really basic ones. These are the ones that most people are going to see, the Irwin Quick Grips. I use these most of the time. No, they're not the strongest clamps, but they're also not the most expensive, so you can get a small collection of them and effectively wait until you need them. When you're going to do that big glue up and suddenly you find that that is not big enough, then go and get yourself the larger ones. However, if I was starting out, when I did start out, I think I got 4 of these, a couple of the big ones, 2 of those, And so far, I've gotten away with 2 of these pipe clamps. You can pick these up relatively cheap, although these Rockler ones are a little bit more expensive. I do like them though. And then as I got into my Kreg joinery, I started getting a few Kreg clamps because they're really, really handy for pocket holes. And every now and then, if they're on special, I pick up a few extras too. Some people are really anal with their collections about getting them all exactly matching. Yeah, I'm about halfway there. Or of course, you just spend a whole bunch of money and get some parallels from Bessie, which are probably the best clamps on the market for general woodworking, but also are going to cost you the most. So up to your budget, don't go overboard to begin with, but do get yourself a handy selection so that you don't get halfway through a glue up and suddenly decide that you're a couple of clamps short of a squeezed joint. Number 4 is probably the oddball choice for this list, and hopefully the one you find the most surprising. A whiteboard. I love lists. I love keeping track of things. I love being able to wipe things off when I'm done with them. However, not everyone might have the space for this, so a clipboard, or simply a notepad that you keep in a place where you know as soon as you go for something like, oh hell, I'm running out of glue, you write your glue down there, and when you have to go to do that shop, you've got the list in front of you. It helps you prioritize and plan out the different projects and videos, if you are a YouTuber, of what you want to make, and it's always good just for scratching notes and things on there. If someone gives you a call, you got to take down a number or something like that. So the least woodworky, and perhaps the one that might be a bit quirkiest, but I do like having my whiteboard in the workshop. It might go without saying, but then again, maybe it doesn't. A workbench and a work surface to do all of your woodwork on is kind of essential. And if you are in a tiny workshop like mine, this is a 1-car garage where the car lives in the garage most of the time, then having bench space is an absolute luxury. This isn't really my tip though. However, if you do see an old tabletop lying on the side of the road, I would highly recommend picking it up because you can lean it against a wall, just like this, and get it out of your way to uncover the real prize. One of the very first things that I bought, and I am glad every day that I did, was this little Ryobi workbench. Let's take a closer look. Building a workbench is probably a rite of passage that most woodworkers go through very early on in their career. In fact, I did build an incredibly crappy little reclaimed workbench, which I still kind of use, but very quickly I purchased this. The reason I bought it was because I wasn't confident in building something as compact, as strong, and as versatile as what a small investment on this thing gave me. It is a glorified sawhorse, but it's so much more than that. As you can see, I use that large work surface in order to do assembly and videos and other things like that. One of the massive things I did early on was build this removable top, which slots in via T-bolts onto here, which can hold my jigsaw, it can hold my router table, it can hold my disc grinder in order to make into a sanding disc. It can do so many different things, and I couldn't get through without it in my shop. It's absolutely indispensable. So it's kind of a personal choice, I suppose. You may be lucky enough to have a workbench and or space large enough to hold a big fixed permanent one. Coming up soon is going to be my first attempt at making a real mobile workbench. That'll be later on in the year, but it's taken me 2 years to get there for the confidence and the skills. So if you are short on space like me and you don't want to dive straight into a workbench build right off the bat, then purchasing something like this is a great idea. If you want to go halfway in between that and you don't want to build a big workbench, you don't want to spend any money, grab yourself some bed slats or other scrap timber and type the word sawhorse into YouTube and you will find 1,000 different ways of building these things. Effectively, a couple of bits and a couple of bolts and you will have yourself a fairly sturdy place in which to saw wood, or using a large flat surface like I did earlier, set yourself up a portable workbench which will get you started as you learn, build up your skills or build up the budget to invest in which way you want to go. Okie dokes guys, that's it for this Fixit Fingers Fibers. If you are a beginner, I hope you got something out of it. If you're a bit more advanced, then leave me some comments on what you think of this list and anything else that you would recommend for someone that's not a tool, but is going to be an essential thing for their workshop. A bin, come to think of it, might be number 6. But we're going to call this Fixit Fingers Fibers done. I'll catch you all soon. Thanks for tuning in.